The chapter 13 was all about your central nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is functionally divided into two kind of major divisions. Those are the sensory and motor divisions. This wouldn't be anatomy if we didn't subdivide those further. So that subdivision, the sensory and motor input, usually gets divided into somatic and visceral, as well as general and special, right? So you have your penis, you have a sensory part, you've got a motor part, and then that gets broken into somatic and visceral, somatic and visceral. And then each of these somatics and viscerals will have either a general or a special nerve to them, or sense to them. And these peripheral nerves allow for the central nervous system to receive information and then initiate action. So they're going to get some info and they're going to do something about it. Usually via some of those motor pathways that we talked about a little bit in chapter 13. Okay? The general visceral part of the peripheral nervous system is the autonomic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system controls all of the things that you don't think about. Like the rate of your breathing, your muscle tone, your heart rate, all kinds of stuff. And that autonomic nervous system has two divisions, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Okay? Your parasympathetic is also known as your rest and digest system, while your sympathetic is your fight or flight. Okay? Cool. All right. So again, this is just showing you kind of the breakdown of the nervous system. So you have your central nervous system. We talked about all of those. That's usually just your brain and spinal cord. And then your peripheral nervous system, we break that down all over the place, okay? So you have a sensory division, you have a motor division. What do you think the somatic nervous system, the motor arm of the somatic nervous system, is going to do? What do you think that controls? Yeah, it controls the motor innervation of your skeletal muscles. So this is all of your voluntary movement. Okay. Okay. So we will essentially organize our peripheral nervous system into kind of three major parts that we talk about. So first is the sensory receptors. Those are the cells or proteins on cells that will pick up stimuli from inside or outside the body. Okay. The second are the nerves and ganglia. Nerves, we all know what nerves are, right? Those are those bundles of peripheral axons, bundles of And those axons are sending information all over the place so that your body can do all the things that it needs to do in a day. And then the ganglia is the location where those axon cell bodies cluster. And then the motor ending is just those axon boutons of motor neurons. Remember those axon boutons, just a fancy way of saying axon terminals. So just the ends of those axons where they will then go to effector organs such as your muscles, your glands, anything like that. You will note that some of your nerves will have both sensory and motor fibers. Okay. Cool? Sick. All right. Peripheral sensory receptors, these are literally just the structures that pick up sensory signals, and they initiate signals in sensory axons. Okay? So these are the guys that start the whole process. There are a whole bunch of different types of peripheral sensory receptors, and we'll talk about those in just a few minutes. Okay? There are two main categories of these receptors. Those are the free nerve endings, and these just monitor some general monitor. Let's see if I can spell today. General sensory information. And the other set are complete receptor cells, and they are usually more specialized. So they handle most of your special sensory information. So things like taste and hearing and a little bit of sight here and there. Okay. Another way that we classify those peripheral sensory receptors are via their function and their location. Their function and their structure. Because what is everything connected to? Structure and function. Okay. When we talk about the function, we talk about where you're going to find them, also the type of stimulus that's detected. This is my preferred way. Of classifying. Why? Because I think it's easiest. Okay. Exteroreceptors. Where do you think that these guys are going to pick up stimulus from and stimuli from outside the body? Okay. So these guys are sensitive to stimuli outside body. Because they are sensitive to stimuli outside of the body, you're probably going to find them near the surface of your body or in that outer tube. It's going to be outer tube information. And they include receptors for things like touch, pressure, pain, temperature, all that stuff. Anything that you can kind of feel with just like the surface of your skin is going to be an exteroreceptor. All right. Interoreceptors, guess what? They're going to receive stimuli from the inner tube. So inside, near your viscera and your organs. So places like your digestive tract, your bladder, your lungs, your heart, all kinds of stuff. And they're going to monitor a bunch of different things, those things such as changes in chemical concentration. This means concentration. Okay. Taste stimuli, tissue stretching, and temperature. We know that our internal temperature is going to be slightly different than our external temperature. Our external temperature can have a little bit of variation to it. You can be cold, you can be warm, but your internal core temperature should stay relatively the same. Anywhere from like 97 to 99 degrees, depending on the person. And there are receptors that help you monitor that. The last type of location-based classification is proprioceptors. Proprioceptors, you're going to find those in your skeletal muscles, your tendons, your joints, and ligaments, and their function is to monitor the degree of stretch of any one of these pieces. And then it will send that information to the central nervous system, and it'll get disseminated and processed in all of the fun ways that we talked about, like your brainstem doing what it needs to do, like your cerebellum processing what it needs to process, and your motor cortex that can tell you how to move. Remember all this stuff? And I would go listen to the chapter 13 presentations. They're all posted. Yeah. Listen to that thing on double time. Okay? Now we're classifying our different types of receptors based on the type of stimulus that they are sensitive to. Okay? This one right here responds to mechanical forces. What do you think it might be called? Yeah, that's a mechanoreceptor. Mechanoreceptors respond to things like touch, pressure, stretch, vibration, itch. That's a type of receptor, itch receptors. Those are fun. Okay? An example of a mechanoreceptor is a baroreceptor. Baroreceptors measure things like blood pressure. That root baro means pressure. Okay? You have receptors that monitor how much blood is pumping through your veins. These ones respond to temperature changes. What do we think they are? Thermoreceptors. Yeah. Okay. These that respond to chemicals in solution, these are chemoreceptors. Cool. Chemo. You see what I'm trying to do there, right? I tried. It's really not letting me write that word. Okay. Photoreceptors respond to light. And you're going to find those mostly in your eye. And then nociceptors. They respond to harmful stimuli that result in pain. So these are going to be your pain receptors. Cool? Cool. So that's classifying them based on their stimulus type. Now we'll classify them based on their structure. Okay? Those general sensory receptors are going to be those kind of freer nerve endings that perceive sensations such as touch, pressure, vibration, stretch, pain, temperature, and proprioception. Sometimes they are free nerve endings, sometimes they are encapsulated nerve endings. Okay. Like I said, we break those up into two groups. Free nerve endings and encapsulated nerve endings. Free nerve endings, you're going to find these mostly in the epithelial tissue and some of the underlying connective. And then these encapsulated ones, you're usually going to find those deeper in like the dermal areas. Okay. One thing to note, these nerves can be either slowly adapting, meaning that they will continue to respond as if they're still being stimulated. Yeah. And action potentials. Or they can be rapidly adapting, meaning that the sensation disappears quickly. Quick. I know that was a lot to write. I'm sorry. Cool. Okay. So those free nerve endings, like I said, you're going to find them a lot in your epithelia. They respond to pain and temperature, and they monitor your affective senses. So they are more sensory, and they will affect the things that affect you. That you're going to want to do something about, like pain and temperature, right? Pain is going to affect you. You're going to try to move away from pain. Temperature is going to affect you. If you're cold, you're going to try to get warm. If you're warm, you're going to try to cool off, right? So stuff like that, okay? And then the specialized ones, these are epithelial, tactile complexes, but don't worry, I will give you a better name for them, also known as Merkel discs. Okay. These consist of some tactile epithelial cells that are innervated by a sensory nerve ending. So it's essentially just like a bunch of cells that have some nerve endings kind of hanging out throughout them. Okay. And they are slowly adapting receptors for light touch. So any kind of like gentle caress of your arm or a gentle caress of your face, that's going to be an epithelial tactile complex. Pretty close to the surface, great for light touch. The other one is going to be your hair follicle receptors. These are rapidly adapting. Oops, that's ugly. Adapting. And they basically measure how much your hair is bending. You have hair all over your body, so anytime, like even the little hairs on your arms get bent or moved, there are some little hair follicle receptors that are monitoring how much that's bending. Again, great for light touch. Okay. Okay. This is just a chart graph thing. Take a look at it when you have some time. Some encapsulated nerve endings. We talked about free nerve endings. These ones are encapsulated. Literally all that means is that they are locked up in some connective tissue. Nerve endings. You don't need to draw this. This is just, I'm doodling, okay? So they are locked up in some connective tissue. They are usually going to be mechanoreceptors. So they will do things like pressure, vibration, deep touch, things like that, okay? And there are 4 main types. Meissner's corpuscles. Did that child say my name? Meissner's corpuscles, Pacinian corpuscles, bulbous corpuscles, and proprioceptors. And then there are 3 types of proprioceptors. Okay. Tactile or Mycinian corpuscles. These are in your dermal papillae. They are rapid adapting for discriminative touch. So being able to tell the difference between things touching you. So like you can tell if like a piece of glass is touching you versus like a piece of plastic or something like that. Okay. So these are more discriminative touch. And these show up in like hairless areas of the body. So like palms of your hands, soles of your feet, gives you a little bit more information about what might be touching. Okay. Another graph. Take a look at it when you have some time. Lamellar corpuscles. These are in subcutaneous deep tissue. They are sensitive to deep pressure. And they are some rapidly adapting receptors. Bro. Their main function is going to be to monitor vibration. So if you were in the Southern California, i.e. San Diego-ish area, and you felt that earthquake yesterday, your lamellar corpuscles, or Pacinian, were monitoring that vibration of the earth and all that shaking that was going on.
Did you get the notice?
I did get the notice.
I got the notice, and then I was reading it, and then it's...
Okay. Bulbous corpuscles, these monitor continuous pressure on the skin, so they are slow adapters. You're going to find them in the dermis, and they mainly respond to pressure. And then you've got your proprioceptors. Sorry, another graph. Look at that when you have time. Proprioceptors. These ones are going to monitor stretch in your locomotory organs. What does that mean? Your muscles. Anything that lets you move is going to be a locomotory organ because of locomotion. Okay. The first type of proprioceptor are muscle spindles. The second are tendon organs. And then the third are joint kinesthetic receptors. Let me put that 2 up. Pardon me. Okay. So muscle spindles will help you measure the changing length of a muscle when you contract it and when you stretch it, right? These are embedded in between the muscle fascicles, right? So they're going to show up in that paramecium. Some important things to know about those, they have some intrafusal muscle fibers and some extrafusal muscle fibers. That's not what I was going to talk about there. And these are just some modified muscle fibers inside those muscle spindles that help with that stretch and compress measuring, okay? Annulosospiral endings are around the middle of those interfusal fibers, and these are a primary sensory ending. And they measure the rate and degree of stretch. So how quickly it is stretching and how much it is stretching. To what degree has this joint or muscle stretched, okay? Next, we have those tendon organs. These are located near the muscle tendon junction. Makes sense, right? And all these really do is monitor the tension within tendons. And we remember tendons connect muscle to bone. So that's showing, these tendon organs are trying to monitor how much your muscle is pulling on your bone, okay? And then the last is joint kinesthetic receptors. And these hang out in the joint capsules. And they have these 4 different kinds of receptors. Notice, these receptors, we just talked about those a few slides ago, except for these ones. They essentially do the same things, but inside your joint capsule. That's what that looks like. Cool. Cranial nerves. This part's gonna go quick because we've already talked about cranial nerves a lot. Okay? So, your cranial nerves attach to the brain and pass through specific foramina in the skull. They are numbered 1 through 12. Cranial nerves 1 and 2 attach to the forebrain. All of the other ones attach where? You're right. Say it louder. The brainstem. To the brainstem. 10 out of your 12 cranial nerves will attach at your brainstem. Okay? Most of them are going to innervate your head and neck structures, except for cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve. Remember that VAG, vague, means wandering. Your vagus nerve is also known as the wandering nerve because it will pass all the way into your abdomen. Okay? So that one travels. Likes to go on a little trip with the girlies. Girls trip, you know what I mean? Cool. Yeah.
For the slide before, it said the motor tension within
Tendons. Okay. is going to be a lot of me asking you guys stuff, so be prepared to answer. All right, so olfactory, cranial nerve 1. They are cut, but cranial nerve 2 passes right through here. They cross, or desiccate, decussate at optic chiasm. Okay, and then everything else is going to hang out right in that brainstem. That's on an animated. This is in a real brain. Much harder to see, but you can definitely still see those olfactory nerves. Your optic nerve, it's cut here. And then all of the other little guys that are attached directly to your brain stem. Okay? I would know this. I would know this. Okay? All of these nerves, not all of them, all of these nerves have some sort of function. Okay? Whether that function be sensory, whether it be motor, or whether it be both. So sometimes they'll have sensory fibers, sometimes they'll have motor fibers, sometimes they will have mixed fibers that have a combination of the two. Okay? Remember, our system is broken into sensory and motor, and then those are further broken into somatic, which is the outer tube, and then visceral, which is inner tube. Okay. If we remember my little mnemonic for whether they're sensory or motor or whatever, we can go some say money matters, but my brother says big boobs matter more. Okay? And this is a pretty complete depiction of whether or not they are sensory or motor. The only one that's a little off is this vestibular cochlear, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Okay? Cool. So, olfactory nerve. What special sense does this one do? Olfactory is your sense of smell. Yeah, great. Okay. You saw where those kind of olfactory epitheliums, the little bunny ear type looking things, kind of hang out near your ethmoid and sphenoid bone. That being said, your olfactory nerves pass through what? Through the cribriform foramina. Of the ethmoid bone. I told you guys this was going to come back. I said it, didn't I? I said it was going to come back, and here we are. We're back. Okay? Cool. Pass through those cribriform foramina. I would look at these if you are confused or scared in any way, shape, or form. These are helpful. Okay? Optic nerve. This one's another special somatic sense. What is its special somatic sense? Sight. Yeah, this is going to be your vision nerve. Okay? These ones are going to originate on the retina of the eye, so kind of the back of your little eyeball. And they pass through what? Of which bone? Of the sphenoid bone. Okay? Optic canal. All right. So, like I said, they start kind of at your retina. At some point, they will cross. So what you see out of your right eye passes through and gets processed on the left side of your brain, and vice versa. That cross, where they cross, is called the optic chiasma. Optic chiasma. That's it. That's the end of my sentence. I was waiting for more too. Nothing else came. Okay? Optic chiasma. And it has special sensory function. It is a special somatic sensory function. Cool? Oculomotor nerves. These ones help to move the muscles around your eye, and they innervate 4 muscles. The superior rectus, the medial rectus, the inferior rectus, and the inferior oblique. Okay? Note, this is a motor nerve. The ones before it were sensory and sensory, but these were both special sensory. Okay? This is our first motor nerve. Okay? This nerve has both somatic motor function as well as some visceral motor function. Okay? So it does play a little bit of a role in our autonomic nervous system. And the visceral motor functions that it does is help constrict your pupil. So if you're getting a lot of light in your eyeballs, your pupils are going to constrict. If it's dark, they're going to expand. And they also help to control the shape of the lens by moving some muscles and stuff like that. And what foramen does this pass through? Yeah, that's going to be your superior orbital fissure. Okay? Superior orbital fissure. So, your boy has somatic motor function and visceral motor function. Okay? What's the next cranial nerve? The trochlear nerve. Okay? The trochlear nerve is another motor nerve, and it innervates specifically the superior oblique muscle. That's another one of those eyeball muscles. It helps to let you move your eyeballs left and right, so laterally. Whichever direction laterally is for either eyeball. Yeah, okay? These will pass ventrally and laterally around the midbrain, so this is getting right into those brainstem areas. And they pass through which foramen? Superior orbital fissure. Orbital fissure. Okay. Cool. That one's fun and festive. Just some somatic motor function. It's just living its little life, doing what it can to move your eyeballs. What's the next cranial nerve? Yeah, the trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal nerve has 3 divisions. What are they? Ophthalmic, mandibular. Let's flip that, maxillary, and mandibular. Okay, V1, V2, and V3 in that order. Okay, this one has both sensory and motor function. Okay. The cell bodies of those sensory neurons are going to hang out in the trigeminal ganglion. What's a ganglia again? A cluster of neuronal cell bodies. Great. And then the mandibular division has some fibers that innervate your chewing muscles. So your masseter, your buccinator, I don't care how the lady says it. I say buccinator. Okay, cool. Where does part 1 pass through? Soup, orb, fizz. 2, foramen rotundum. And 3, foramen ovale. And a little bit into that mandibular foramen. I remember my little three eye guys: ophthalmic, maxillary, mandibular. I'm not going to try to draw that. Okay? Cool. That's what it looks like. Crazy, right? But they all pass right in here. Ophthalmic, maxillary, mandibular. And this is going to be a both kind of guy. Great, we've already done 14.1 and 14.2. Now let's push into 14.3. I forgot to delete that, I'm sorry. Okay? Next nerve, cranial nerve 6. That is going to be your abducens nerve. This is going to be a motor guy. It innervates the lateral rectus muscle and helps to abduct the eye. You don't think of your eye abducting too much, but it's just looking away. I can't get both of my eyes to do it, but you get what I'm trying to do there. It passes through I heard a little bit. The superior orbital fissure. A lot of the eye ones do. Notice these are all eyeball muscle nerves. All like abducens, 3, 4. They are all eyeball moving nerves, right? Makes sense. Okay. There it is. It exists. Abduct your eye when you get a chance. Facial nerve. Facial nerve is big. It has lots of functions. Okay? It is a both kind of guy. So it has some sensory function and it has motor function. And in that motor function, it has somatic function and visceral function. Okay? It does some special visceral sensory from the taste buds, yeah. On the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Okay. As far as somatic function, it innervates a lot of your face muscles. Those 5 branches that it's talking about are the temporal, branch, the zygomatic branch, the buccal branch, the mandibular branch, and the cervical branch. All right. As far as visceral motor functions, it innervates your lacrimal glands, your submandibular glands, and your sublingual salivary glands. So that one makes your tears. This one makes saliva, I think. And this one is also a saliva-making gland. You're going to find this nerve passing through where? Stylomastoid process, yeah, kind of, but more so your internal acoustic meatus. Acoustic meatus. And a little bit of that styloid process. A little. Just a little. Okay? That motor branch is going to come out to that stylomastoid process. Those are those branches that I was talking about there. That's the temporal branch, the zygomatic branch, the buccal branch, the mandibular branch, and then the cervical branch. They kind of all just break up in there. But they all start from that one big old nerve. Next, you've got your vestibulocochlear nerve. These are nerves of hearing and equilibrium. So my brother says this one's going to be mainly sensory. Mainly. It does have a couple little motor things here and there, but they're more so to help you with your balance and equilibrium than they are really for like doing things that you would think about. Okay. So the vestibular branch, what special somatic sense do you think this one deals with? I heard it.
Balance.
Yeah, balance and equilibrium. And then your cochlear branch, hearing. Okay. And this one, its fibers pass through, yeah, definitely that internal acoustic meatus. Can I do it? Okay, cool, cool. What's next? Say it louder. Glossopharyngeal. Glossopharyngeal. Okay, this one has a little bit of both. Has some motor and some sensory to it. It does some special visceral sensation from the taste buds on the back third of the tongue. So that's where you taste at the back of your tongue. Some general visceral sensory information, some chemoreceptors, baroreceptors, some other stuff here and there to help with the kind of internal stuff. Okay? As far as motor functions, it helps to elevate the pharynx when you swallow. Visceral motor, it innervates the parotid salivary gland. This one's another one that makes saliva. Makes and dispenses saliva. And it passes through what foramen? I didn't hear that, but it's the jugular foramen. Okay? So glossopharyngeal has a little bit of everything. It has some visceral sensory sensation, some visceral motor, and some somatic motor. So it does a little bit of everything. Okay? There it is. Vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is a big old nerve. It has both sensory and motor. And it has both visceral sensory, somatic sensory, a little bit of somatic sensory. I'm going to take that back. Visceral motor and somatic motor. Okay? As far as sensory sensations, some general visceral sensory general visceral sensory sensation from your thoracic and abdominal viscera, so the inside of kind of your chest and your abdomen. It will get things like nausea, temperature, pain, anything like that. And then special visceral sensory sensation on your taste buds, on your epiglottis. That's that little thingy hanging near the back of your throat. It's kind of right in here. That's actually your uvula, but that's a different conversation. Okay? It does some somatic motor functions to the larynx and pharynx. These ones are your breathing, talking, swallowing tubes. Okay? And then as far as visceral motor functions, it does some pretty important parasympathetic innervation to your heart, your lungs, and your abdominal viscera. And it exits through the jugular foramen. Note all of the things that your vagus nerve touch or attach to or innervate. So it does a lot of parasympathetic and sympathetic, for that matter, innervation to these internal organs. Almost done, guys. I'm sorry. Somatic motor, cranial nerve 11, your accessory nerve. This innervates your trapezius muscle. That's that big triangular guy coming down from the back. And your sternocleidomastoid. Sternocleidomastoid. Okay? It's formed from the ventral rootlets of C1 through C5. This one does not show up at the brainstem. That's okay. That's fine. And then those spinal rootlets we'll talk about. Actually, I'm not going to talk about them. You guys are going to read about them later. Okay? And it passes through the foramen magnum and exits that jugular foramen. It's a fun guy. It's mostly motor. Sorry. And then last cranial nerve is number 12, the hypoglossal nerve. It does mostly motor function. And it innervates the muscles of the tongue. And it exits the skull through what? Everybody? The hypoglossal canal. Okay? Super great at that. Cool? Cool.